Hi, I'm Nathan Kelly, and welcome to Words and Music. Today we talk with Dhane Howard, legendary Australian musician, singer, songwriter, and social justice advocate. We talk about his career and the music he's created over the past 40 years. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the album Spirit of Place by Howard's band Goanna. So he's hitting the road with this band to pay homage to this great album. How are you today, Dhane?
Hi, how are you? Good to see you, Nathan. Thanks for all your support and your great photographs and everything
No
over the
worries.
years.
Look,
Yeah,
I'm so excited that Goanna have got back together to play some shows.
it's pretty wild. Hey, like this wasn't on the radar a year ago. Um, didn't really see it coming. It was through Love Police, Brian Taranto, the promoter, and he kind of approached and said, "Goanna, let's do Goanna." And I went, "No, 10 years too late. Um, too old." And But he was very insistent. He was a fan when he was a teenager. He came to Goanna Manor. And when we had our very first rehearsal, we had to get together to see if we wanted to do it or not. When we brought Rose and Mars and Davo and everyone together, we had in Geelong and BT, we call him, from Love Police. He pulled out this letter that he wrote as his 15, 16-year-old kid to Goanna, and he read it out to us. So he was a very, he was a very, he was a big fan, and so he just said it'd be a great thing to do and to honour that Spirit of Place album and whatever. And look, I just haven't been there in the past. We did a thing in the 30th anniversary out at Uluru to honour Solid Rock in the 30 years, but yeah, we haven't kind of been in the headspace for it, I guess, and so yeah, maybe it's old. Mortality's looming, and it was like, what the hell? Let's honour that record and let's thank everybody for giving us a career in music.
I think for me and probably a lot of other people, we've never seen Goanna play. We've just heard all the songs, and I
Yeah,
think
right.
the 40 years is like I'd probably given up on seeing the band play. I've seen you
Yeah,
play a few times, and I think now people are like, okay, this is going to be great. You played away at Adelaide. How did that
yeah.
go?
WOMAD was pretty wild, actually. There were, we've been orbiting a black hole for 2 years with COVID, and time just froze and stood still. And and during that time, you kind of go, well, maybe this might go on for 2, 3, 4 more years. Maybe that's how your career ends. It just ends with a whimper, and that's it. And I felt for a lot of the young people, but next thing you know, it's all back on. And the first gig that came up was that was offered to us was WOMAD. So it was a very attractive thing to do, the main stage there, and it was bizarre. There's 15,000 people with no masks on them at the main stage, all going off, people crying. Yeah, we were showing footage of that I shot down the Franklin River in 1983 on my Super 8 camera, and we were projecting that behind us when we played. And it's very emotional for a lot of people. There's a lot of love out there for the old Goanna, and um, WOMAD was incredible. Really, it was just a very and I, at one stage, well, I walked across to Davo, the lead guitar player, and I said, "Is this for real?" And he just laughed, and yeah, it seemed pretty surreal. So it's very powerful, very beautiful for a lot of the audience, and powerful and for us too.
Yeah. So we're talking about there at like the start of the Goanna tour at the end of COVID. But let's just go back to the start of your career. If there was one song or musician that really inspired you to become a musician, what would that be?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that. One is that music is a gift, they say, and I understand that now. It's a gift because it's given to you. And for me, and for Mars too, our mother gave us the love of music, and she played piano and sang, and she worked on radio in 3IB in Warrnambool during the war years, um, and loved poetry and stuff. So the gift was given from there, from childhood, and we sang as a family and stuff at home and around the country halls and that. But the inspiration as a songwriter and performer to want to sing and write came from Bob Dylan. Um, I was probably 10 years old, and my oldest brother was at uni, and he came home one weekend, and we had an English couple who lived next door to us. They shifted from England out to work at the Nestles factory where my dad worked. And I used to go in and help Jim. He built little boats as well, wooden boats, beautiful boats, and I'd go in and help him. And when my brother was home, he said to my brother, "Oh, some friends have sent me these great albums from England. Should come in and have a listen." And one of them was "The Times They Are Changing," the Dylan album. And look, we'd heard Peter, Paul, and Mary do "Blowing in the Wind" and that very beautiful but sweet, three-part harmony, um, kind of popular version of that song. But when I heard Dylan singing "Times They Are Changing" and the Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll and the Ballad of Hollis Brown and this gritty kind of realism sung by a young man who seemed to be inhabiting an old man's voice. Um, it was with God on our side, Masters of War. Like just song after song is like, even this far down the track, those songs are still powerful and they're almost, I forget who said it, but once you hear them, it's like they always existed. They're, and I guess that inspired me as a writer to want to write songs, and that song could be a vehicle, not necessarily for change, but that it could influence people who were change makers.
So all those songs you mentioned there, they're all got to do with social justice, really. And
Yeah,
your song, Solid Rock, for me, I'm 46, and no doubt many other people really brought Indigenous issues to the suburbs of Australia. Is that one of your proudest achievements?
yeah, it is. I didn't know it at the time. When I wrote that song after coming back from Uluru in '81 and spending time out there with the community and coincidentally witnessing Inma and song and dance and traditional song and dance, I just happened to intersect when the mob from Armidale were there to reconnect with country and to set up a little tent and sell artefacts and try and make a little bit of money for the community. It turned into Maracoo Arts, which is still there today, which was the beginning of a really big Western desert art collective. I just happened to connect at that time with those people, and I saw something really powerful and beautiful, and I saw deep the deep cultural tradition of this country, and I realised I was in someone else's country, and I thought I was Australian. I thought I knew what Australia was, and I realised I had no idea. And here was this old cultural reality, around about the dawn of time that went back so far, so deep into country, that it started me on a lifelong journey, really. That song emerged out of that experience and then going back to Alice Springs and seeing the racism and the neglect and the drunkenness and all of the horrors of the colonial imposition that we brought to this once proud people. And once you know, you can't unknow. You can walk away, but I couldn't. I guess that song, that the second half of that second verse, chorus goes, "The winds of change were blowing cold that night," and the last verse then is pretty damning about standing on the shore and the invasion that comes and all the attendant genocide and horror that comes with that invasion. Um, and Captain Cook lied, it was genocide, it was cultural genocide, it was actual genocide. Um, and The song was true. It was truthful. I think that's why it stood the test of time. Um, at the time, I thought it was topical. Like I thought Let the Franklin Flow was topical. I thought they might be relevant for that moment in time and then maybe blow away in the wind. Um, but no, it was it was to stick in a way I could never have understood it back then, Nathan. And it's grown more and more powerful, and it's almost beyond me now. That song, it's owned by the country, and so owned by Aboriginal people all around Australia too. I'm so proud of that. I was a kid from a little town of 300 people, little white kid. What the hell? What am I doing writing that song? Um, so yeah, am I proud of it? Yeah, I am. And I walked off stage on January the 26th at the Opera House when invited to perform it by William Barton, who I met at Mount Isa as a little kid in 1983 with his parents, and uh, and Emma Donovan and the uh, the singers from Sydney, and we sang it in Gadigal, and we sang it in Pitjantjatjara, Yungajarra, with the Awiri choir from that APY land, Anangu country out where at Uluru. Um, the Tapai Edwards and the mob out there danced the Nintaka Inma story, one of the stories from the Goanna man legend songline. Um, there's permission from old Mr. Miller, who is a senior custodian of that Nintaka, that Goanna songline, and his painting was projected onto the Opera House at sunrise on the 26th of January this year. And I walked off stage after that performance, very powerful performance, and I was deeply humbled by what I was given back. I was the only white fella to perform in that performance of the song. And I said to my wife, Therese, and I walked off, and the tears fell freely. And I said, I think I've done everything I need to do to honour that song, and it's done everything to break my heart and to make my heart.
I took my kids out to Uluru last year, and I'd never been there myself before, and they're just 11 and 13, and we drove across from Kansas, just a bit of a side story, and
Yeah.
it just blew them away, and it also blew me away. Like, I'm there thinking this is one of the most amazing places I've ever been to in my life. So I can
Yeah.
only imagine what it would have been like there in 1981.
It was pretty basic, like there was no Yulara resort or there was no real infrastructure. You just camped where the community, Mutijulu community was, and um, yeah, it was pretty basic. So it had a great sense of pilgrimage, I guess, back then. It still does. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I think
magnetic.
it does.
Yeah, it's magnetic, and when you see it, you can't take your eyes off it. It's like it's higher than the Eiffel Tower. It's 9 kilometres around. The sheer scale of it just blows your mind, really. And no matter how many times I go back there, and I've been back a lot of times, it's still, I've seen it a few times with waterfalls pouring off it and rain coming off and water gathering all around. And like, it's like this giver of life. Take that rock away, it's just a desert. It's just a desert. But that rock means that water collects and gathers and is stored and held. So life is abundant there. And the stories are written on the rock. It's like, and as you walk around there and you understand those stories, it's like reading the Bible.
Mm.
It's that kind of complexity of intersecting songlines and stories and law, all of that. It's deeply complex.
Yeah, and I think it's just an amazing experience that probably everyone in Australia should go and do at least once.
Yeah,
I tell all my friends, they're like, "Oh, I've always wanted to go," and I'm like, "Hey guys, now's the time to go. We're in our mid-40s. Just go do
yeah,
it."
yeah. Because it will never leave you. Hey, that experience, and it's what's it doing right in the middle of the country, like a big red heart? It's something else, eh?
Yeah, and I think you were 26 when you first visited there and wrote
Yeah.
that song. I'm 46. I think it doesn't matter what age you are when you go there. It really does something to you.
It truly is awe-inspiring, hey, Nathan. And yeah, it started me. It was a moment for me, and like I said, experiencing Inma and song and dance and meeting community for the first time there in that deep way. Um, there's stuff going on here that is very deep and very complex, a very complex cosmology. And these are not a primitive people. These are highly civilized people who have a very sophisticated cosmology. And it's a never-ending journey that started,
Yeah.
really, yeah.
You toured Ireland in 1993 with Mary Black, and having you've come from a large Irish Catholic family. What were your thoughts on that experience? Because, in a sense, that's traveling to your ancestral home.
Yeah, it was interesting. I toured with Mary in Australia at the end of '92, and it was the first time I'd met her. I met the band because she had Declan Sinnott playing guitar with her, and he'd been in a band called Moving Pictures in Ireland. They played with Van Morrison, really highly respected musos, and meeting Declan was a big thing for me too. Mary was great. We got on like brother and sister. We got on like a house on fire, and great sense of humour, wicked sense of humour, all of them. And uh, I was just recording the Time Will Tell album then, and I played Flesh and Blood on that tour. What I didn't know is her engineer recorded my set as well. Because I was in the middle of, I was just making the album Time Will Tell, and I hadn't even recorded that song myself or released it. So I got a phone call. I'm in the studio finishing off with mixing Time Will Tell in January '93, and I get a phone call from this fellow with an Irish accent. He said, "Oh, hello, Shane. Yeah, it's Joe O'Reilly here, Mary Black's manager, and Mary's had a big hit in Ireland with your song Flesh and Blood, and we'd love you to come to Ireland and tour with her." And I went, "Yeah," pull the other one, yeah. And I hung up. I thought it was a mate just pulling my leg. And because I went, I haven't even released that song yet. No one even has heard it. But he rang back and he said, "Oh, I don't know what happened. We got cut off there." And I realised it was for real. So I went, yeah, I went toured Ireland with Mary, and it began a really long, beautiful friendship with Mary that continues to this day, and with lots of people who are in her band and lots of other great Irish connection. I'd met with Liam O'Manley and Hot Ass Flowers and recorded with them in 1991 and toured with them. So lots of great Irish connections. But I also got to go back to, I thought I may never get back here again at that time. And I was able, on instruction from my mother, I went to Tipperary, to Nina, to the Heritage Centre, and I was able to make a connection, go looking for my great-grandmother, my mother's grandmother, who had come from Ireland in the wake of the famine as a young orphan girl. Her parents and her family had all perished in the famine. And I found my way back to a little place called Silver Mines in Tipperary, Baileygowan, which is where Shane McGowan's from too, and his people. And it led me out the road to a little farmlet, and there was a branch of the family still living there. And so it was this incredible feeling of a circle connecting again. And I walked up, I drove up the driveway, and I was feeling a bit anxious about it. And this old farmer came walking down in his gumboots and his jacket and his cap, and he said, "Are you right there?" And I said, "Look, the misty rain was falling. It's a bit of a long story," I said, "but I think we might be related." And he looked at me and he went, "You'd better come up to the house." Anyway, we were able to join all the dots up, and it was amazing. And then he took me out and showed me my where my great grandmother was born and where her family was and their house, which is all broken down. It was pretty powerful stuff, and you realise that's your indigenous reality. It's your people, it's your ancestors, and the feet of my belonging are deep in that country. But the feet of my ancestors are deep in that country, but my own feet are in this other country. And it's you feel torn and you go, where do I belong really? My ancestors are here. So there's all this complexity that comes, and it's Aboriginal Australia that sends me back to Ireland really with an understanding of what that even means, indigeneity. So I felt a deep connection to country. They were powerful things. I'm eternally grateful to Mary. And not only that, I'm touring around playing to we did 5 nights in Dublin and the Point Theatre to 5,000 people a night, and they're all singing along to Mary doing Flesh and Blood, and I'm up there with her singing it as well. And I thought, wow, if the ancestors can see us now, it was a pretty amazing way to return to your ancestral country, Nathan.
You put on this show, Exile, Songs of Irish Australia, and it seemed like a great show. I couldn't get down to see that, but do you think, being of an Irish background, who have been oppressed by the British for so long, that gives you some kind of unique insight into the Aboriginal experience in Australia?
There's great similarities, no doubt about it. Remember my dear friend Bart Willoughby, from No Fixed Address. We're like brothers from another mother, and we've known each other for over 40 years. But Bart said to me, he saw a documentary on television some years ago, and he said, I thought we had it bad. You guys had 600 years. I said, yeah, I know. You know, and yeah, it wasn't always so cruel, but yeah, no, it was. It was from Cromwell on. It was brutal, and the irony of that is that the Irish were fighting to protect in Ireland to protect an English king, Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was the rightful heir to the throne, but he was a Catholic king, and they were fighting in his defence. He was defeated, the Irish were defeated, and they paid the price ever since. So, yeah, there were uprisings over the years forever, really. The Irish never ceded their sovereignty, and they kept uprising, kept being crushed, mercilessly. And by the 1820s, when the Catholic Emancipation Act was passed eventually, where if you're Catholic, but prior to that, you were taxed on the size of your windows. That's why people had small windows in their homes. You couldn't own a property over £5. You couldn't own a horse worth more than a certain amount of money. You couldn't get educated. You couldn't own property. You couldn't do anything in your own country, your own ancestral country. Um, it was brutal, and really, it's hard. It's hard to look back at that. And so, yeah, there are lots of similarities, I guess, when you look deeply into that. And I did many trips, a dozen trips since, 93 back to Ireland, Nathan, and fell deeply into the whole history, forever. We grew up singing Irish rebel songs anyway, at home. Once you understand that, it's deeply disturbing, but it does. And I think there is a kind of race memory, a deep scarring on your soul because of that. It did prepare me for a kind of empathy with Aboriginal Australia, definitely.
Yeah, you just mentioned rebel songs there. Part of that Exile, Songs of Irish Australia, you talk about your great grandfather being arrested at the Eureka Stockade, and you wrote a song called Rebel Song, which I really like. And I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how that song came about.
Well, I was really young when I wrote that. I was only about 18, actually. And my father's oldest sister, my auntie Moira, she was home one time visiting us, and they ran Young and Jackson's Hotel in Melbourne. They managed it. And she came home one time. She said, your great grandfather was arrested at the Eureka Stockade," and that was like, wow, yeah, because we'd learned at school about a bit about the Eureka Stockade and what had happened there, and it was kind of like, wow, okay, it was a bit of a rebel. It seemed pretty interesting at the time. Um, and then when I kind of read up more about it, I became more fascinated with it, I guess, and the Peter Lawler story, the Chips Rafferty film, and it seemed pretty heroic. And as a young person, you could go, that's pretty attractive. So, I said to my dad said to us, look, we don't know for sure. It's just a story in the family. I ended up getting more and more caught up in it, and then about '86, a fellow called Paul Murphy got me involved to come and play at Ballarat at the Eureka gatherings that used to happen annually there, and it became a regular fixture. I'd go to Ballarat and play at the Euchre Gathering. One time with Gough Whitlam and on the stage, and Thomas Keneally and some great luminaries who also went to Ballarat and saw it as a really important part of Australian democracy, as I do too. And the song kind of grew in stature, and eventually I recorded it for the Clan album. I don't think it wasn't until 1996, I think, I recorded it. But it had existed since, the late 70s. We played it in a very early incarnation of Goanna when it was a four-piece band in Geelong in 1978. And then in the late 90s, I was asked to perform at the Old Melbourne Jail where Ned Kelly was hung, and where the Eureka, the people who were taken as the ringleaders and held in the Old Melbourne Jail for trial and all acquitted, I performed there in the Old Melbourne Jail. And at that event, the keeper of the public records, Ross Gibbs, in Melbourne, he actually presented me. I didn't know that was going to happen, and my mum and dad were there, and some of my family presented me with a facsimile copy of my great-grandfather's arrest papers at Eureka. So all of a sudden, an oral history became reality, and so it was very powerful. So it's a badge of honour that I wear proudly.
In 2010, you published this beautiful book of your lyrics, and at the end of your preface, you acknowledge the Aboriginal country that you're on, where you were writing that preface. And I'd never seen this before. That's over a decade ago now, but it's become really commonplace for people to acknowledge the country that they're on. What led to you doing that in 2010?
Well, again, where I grew up here in this country in southwest Victoria, and I lived in North Queensland for 7 years and been in Broome. I've now lived around the place. I've travelled, but I came back here for lots of reasons. I know this country, it knows me. I felt I had to make peace with my home country. This is where my ancestors landed, and this is where I feel I belong in this Pequarong country. And Aboriginal people were a fact of life growing up as well. Like, I knew there was something wrong. I knew I could see the racism. We saw it. My mum and dad weren't racist. They were good people, good, simple people. And my mother had Aboriginal women friends. My father was a great sportsman, and he played footy with Archie Roach's dad. And he umpired lots of games. There's a great story about him sticking up for some of the Aboriginal players in the Aboriginal footy team out at Framlingham. And then Solid Rock. All this feeds into Solid Rock and writing that song. That song is a massive hit. Goanna go touring around Australia. Everywhere we go. Cairns, for example, we're sneaking, 10 Aboriginal people in the back door through the band room because they can't get in the main door because of the dress code. And even if they were wearing a three-piece suit, they'd still say, "No, you're not dressed right." This was real. The racism was real. And everywhere we went, there'd be 3, 4, 5 Aboriginal people come and check out these white fellas. What these white fellas on about with Solid Rock? What do they know? And we'd sit up late in the night and hear the stories of the massacres, the dispossession, the racism, the neglect, the hardship, and the humour. Hearing Aboriginal people, Murray's, talk about white fellas. And when you see the world from an Aboriginal perspective too, and you see white fellas and all their kind of formality from an Aboriginal perspective, it shatters all illusions. And but the deep humanity as well, and the forgiveness, all those things. So that journey is just Solid Rock. Threw me into Aboriginal Australia, and I never came out. That's where I live, in that reality, really. And it's amazing now to watch, like television, mainstream television shows saying, "Oh, we're on Bundjalung country, or we're on Gadigal country, or whatever." Yeah, so I learnt those things from the people, and it was Aboriginal people who taught me how to be on country.
I think it's kind of like solid rock was way before its time dealing with land rights. That your acknowledgement in that preface was also way before its time. You know, it's just become, as you said, now commonplace in the last 18 months to
Well,
acknowledge
in
where people are.
That's true, and I mean in the late '80s, even Nathan, and I was living up north. From after Goanna kind of fell apart ingloriously. I was living up north. I ended up out in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and like I said, for about 7 years, and I saw how Aboriginal people were treated, and yeah, it hurt. It hurt to see my friends, my brothers, and my sisters treated that way. Um, but it's remarkable. I thought the country would never change. I thought it was just. But this country was never going to change. I thought we were just stuck in this racist mindset. And I'd almost given up on Australia in that regard. But, you just got to keep fighting, keep fighting. And I came back home here and I thought, I've got to start in my own backyard and with my own connections through my own family and my own people. And we started a cultural festival when I came back here with the local mob. And that went for 20 years and, helped to break down a lot of cultural barriers and stuff as well. And reinvigorating language and the names of country and making that popular and mainstream talk and all that. But and now like you said, now on the telly you hear it all the time. It's like in fact the last 5 years, I think, even the last 2 years, it's accelerated enormously, and I think NITV's played a big role in mainstream Australia's understanding of Aboriginal Australia. We're all we're people. We want our kids to be happy and healthy, and get educated and live good lives.
So you're playing up here at the Tanks Art Centre. Now, I
Yeah.
was trying to remember, I think, is it 7 years ago you last played up here solo, 2015?
Oh, you know better than me, actually. Yeah,
I
probably is that long. Yeah,
yeah, so
you were there.
I was there. We did a portrait shoot, and then you
Yeah,
played before that with Black Armband, and
that's right. Yeah,
that was the first time I ever saw you playing live. That was such an awesome show.
that was an incredible thing to do. Yeah, that began in 2006. Yeah, 2005 we started the idea, and the rehearsals in 2006 were our first shows. It ran for a long time. It toured back to England. We played on the banks of the Thames at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, right in the heart of London. And we're looking out at the water with all that Aboriginal mob there. And we're going, so this is where Cook set out from. This is where it all started. And so we were laughing about it. We're taking England back. We're claiming it for Australia, Aboriginal Australia, like burn 'em. But that was a really powerful. I guess all these things I see as kind of stepping stones along the way. That and I felt very honoured to be in that ensemble as a founding member. Um, I felt it was lifting all those Aboriginal voices up, and Solid Rock was there, welcomed into the midst of that, great company of, you know, um, Archie Roach and Kutcher Edwards, Bart Willoughby, Dan Sultan, GR from Warumpi Band did some shows. So lots of people who have passed and gone now. It was it was powerful. Shelley Morris, now Dr. Shelley Morris. Um, Lots of great empowerment came out of that, the Black Arm Band. Yeah, I'm proud of that.
What can audiences expect at Tanks from the Goanna show?
Who knows? How long's a piece of string? Now, look, we've come to play Spirit of Place, and we've come to honour that album. Yeah, at the end of the day, 500,000 people bought that album at the time. That has allowed me and Rose and Mustard, allowed us to be artists all our life. What a privilege! What an honour! This is our way of saying thank you. And like you said, lots of people. When I was all those years, 40 years, I've been doing Shane Howard gigs and that since Goanna finished, and I play solid rock and I play Franklin and I play Razor's Edge, but I haven't played those other songs. 4 Weeks Gone, Children of the Southern Land, Scenes from an Occasional Window, Borderline, On the Platform, Rosie's beautiful song, 4 Weeks Gone, Factory Man. And when I went back and listened to that album, I'd thrown it away all those years ago because I went, oh, that was just a young man's naive optimism and youthful idealism. But, as an old man, I go back and I listen to that album and I go, wow, yes, yeah, let's have more of that. Let's say, like we were, the what the Franklin was saying about protection and preservation of old growth forests and environment was urgent back then. Now it's absolutely critical. We're on the precipice. Our children and grandchildren are looking. We're consigning them to a hell on earth. You know, we've got unfinished business here. Yeah, same Aboriginal people, most incarcerated people on earth. All my brothers and sisters, so many of them are dying way too young from diabetes. Four Corners a few weeks ago about RHD, about rheumatic heart conditions happening out in Dormagee now, right now as we speak. And this is the consequence still, the intergenerational consequence of the colonial imposition and what happened here. It can't be fixed in a moment. So we have to really commit ourselves. It has to come from the government down. It has to come from leadership. And it has to be intergenerational. We have to do better by our First Nations people. We've come a long way. We've done some great things. There's a lot of great empowerment. But too many young people suiciding still in these remote communities. Too many preventable illnesses happening. In the remote communities, out of sight, out of mind. We have to redouble our efforts. We have to commit ourselves to really going, are we going to be a just country? All those things that were fought for at the Eureka Stockade, are we still going to hold that torch high and say we're building a great democracy, one of the greatest democracies on earth, and we're proud to hold the torch high and be a beacon of hope for the rest of the world? Because as Trump showed us in January last year, democracy is a very fragile thing, and the same that Putin is showing in Ukraine. We have to remain vigilant. We have to do better. So yeah, we're going out swinging. Goanna is here to remind us that we're going to dance our way to a really good vibe and a good situation, and we can have a better country, we're going to have a better world, and we can be smiling, laughing, singing while we do it. And let's leave a beautiful legacy for our kids and our grandkids. Why the hell not? If you're not doing that, you're taking up space and you're wasting time, hey?
Right. Hey, thanks for your time today, Shane. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Nathan.
I'm looking
Thank you.
really forward to seeing your show in Cairns, and I'm sure it's going to go off.
Well, and look, just to add to what you said before, there'll be a few things slip in there too, maybe. Like, Common Ground might slip in there too, and, every now and then, Shadow of Your Love, which was an obscure track recorded around the same time as Spirit of Place, but it didn't get a Guernsey till it was a B-side of a single. Let the Franklin Flow wasn't on the album, but should have been, but we'd already released the album, but it belongs in that period. There's some beautiful songs off The Spirit Returns, that third Goanna album, like Light of Day, more relevant than ever with climate change, and that beautiful song of Marcia's, Song for East Timor, which is very poignant in the light of what's happening in the Ukraine. So yeah, we're honouring Spirit of Place, but we're not afraid to mix and match too, Looking forward to getting to Cairns too. Yeah, back to Cairns.
Well, it'll be nice weather by then.
Too many friends up there, yeah? The guest list is too long, eh? Yeah, but lots of great family connections, lots of great friends, too many Murray friends. I think I'm Granda's second favourite son. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Should be a good night.
Thanks, Nathan.
Okay,
see you then, brother.
That was Shane Howard from the Australian band Goanna, talking to us on the 40th anniversary of their album Spirit of Place. I thought I'd leave you with this track from that album, Scenes from an Occasional Window. I hope you enjoy it. You've been listening to Nathan Kelly, talking words and music.
Well, I don't care if there's another war. I don't care what they're fighting for. And I don't care if your love's misplaced. Let the earth spin deeper into space. But I sure would like to see you smile tonight. And I just wanna say you took me by surprise. 'Cause I've been tearing up the walls and screaming, is this love or is this treason? Till I don't understand what's going on. What's going on? And I've been fooling with the wheels of change, feel a sudden need to rearrange. Yeah. Hey, one way's up and the other's down, and in the end it all comes back around. Me and you, something in between. Lovers come with warm embraces and disappear, leave no traces. No one understands the simple song. Hey, what's gone wrong? It's taken too long. Yeah, well, come on. We could talk all night. Maybe get it right. Yeah, but nothing makes this picture clearer. Like the love they both get dearer. No one understands what's going wrong. And I've been tearing up the walls and screaming, is this love or is this dreaming? Till I don't understand what's going on. Going on. Going on. Going on. Well, it just keeps going on. And on and on. And on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Love's coming down. It's coming down. It's coming back around. Look out, it's coming down. It's coming back around.
If you liked today's episode with Shane Howard, it'd be great if you subscribe to our YouTube channel or liked our Facebook page to keep up with all the other podcasts we'll be doing in the future.